Hi, everybody, and welcome so much. I am Kelly Doherty, and I'm here with Karyn Arnold. We are the Grief Ladies, and today's workshop is Improving Communication When No One Understands, a topic that we love to talk about, and we are grateful that you are here to have this. So, as I just said, my name is Kelly Doherty. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in upstate New York and I own a private practice where I specialize in working with children and adults that have experienced grief and loss. Been doing this for about 25 years, even though I did start my first volunteer job at hospice when I was 16. So I've been doing it even longer. And I also own Center for Informed Grief, which the Grief Ladies falls under. And I also train therapists to help them become more grief informed because 60% of therapists didn't have any education in grief and loss in undergraduate or graduate. So I'm really passionate about helping providers become more grief informed so that there are more grief informed professionals out there to support grieving individuals like all of you. I want to thank you for being here. And I know nobody wants to have to come to a workshop like this. Nobody wants to have to be on the grief journey. It's not easy. And it can be hard, but we are really grateful that you're here. And we hope that this event will be something useful. And we'll talk more about some of the resources that we'll be sending you following the workshop as well.
Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Arnold and very happy to be here with Kelly today and with all of you. Yeah, and as we always say, we know it's difficult coming to something like this, although hopefully today this just gives you a chance to kind of sit back and listen and get some information. But we're glad that you found us because, the resources, the support, as much information gathering as you can do, it helps. So, a little bit about me. I'm a grief coach. I'm located in Pennsylvania, just a little north of Philadelphia. I have been doing this work. Kelly and I always say I would be curious if we went back to our start dates because they're so close. At this point, I think we both say it's been probably about 25 years that we've been doing this. We both have hospice experience. And I, probably about 10 years ago, started Grief in Common, which is a website that is kind of a gathering place in a community. But from there are support groups, education programs, and I also do individual one on one sessions with people via Zoom and over the phone. So, I think Kelly and I have a very similar philosophy. We'll talk a little bit about some of what that is. And, our topic today is one that's really important for both of us. So, you do get a copy of this presentation when we're done, along with a couple of other things. So, this contact information for me, if you want to know more, will be in there as well.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
And for those of you that don't know us, I'm just going to give a little bit of background on how the Grief Ladies came to be. So, several years ago, I was involved in a collaborative book, and I've always wanted to be an author, always wanted to write, and just didn't know how to even get started. So, got to be included in this collaborative book called Holistic Mental Health. And then I decided I wanted to lead my own collaborative book. So I had to find 24 authors who I did not know to help contribute to this book. And so I kind of put out some Facebook posts, some things on LinkedIn, and Karen would tell you that she had just joined this Facebook group, like literally the day before I posted. And we connected. And obviously, because I think we both are very passionate about this work and we both have hospice experience, we just clicked automatically. And so grateful that Karen was part of the book, The Grief Experience Tools for Acceptance, Resilience, and Connection. And actually, it's kind of what her chapter is about in the book is about communication. And so this really kind of just goes along with it. And we wanted to continue to do things together. We wanted to continue to write together and share opportunities for grieving individuals to come together to feel less alone in their grief journey. And so the Grief Ladies came out of that. And we have created a Facebook group. We're going to talk a lot about different opportunities that we have through the Grief Ladies platform throughout this workshop, and also for ways to stay connected with us following this, and also some really exciting things that are coming down the path for us. So, again, we're going to talk a little bit about our grief framework. So, for those of you that aren't familiar, we've created a grief framework based on the word grief. And so, we will talk about that. We're going to talk about how other people handle grief and relationships we have with them. How do you handle some of those questions, like, how are you? What to say and what not to say, and who to say it to. and also when maybe communication isn't or no longer an option with others in our network. So as I said, Karen and I just clicked, and I think we had some similar beliefs about certain things. We both didn't believe in the 5 stages of grief. We also believed, like, everybody says there's no right or wrong way to grieve, but both of us have been doing this for a long time, and we've seen things that actually do help grieving individuals. And so I think both of us want to challenge that belief that there is really unhealthy ways to grieve, right? But there's also a lot of things you can do to help your grief. To help you on your grief journey. It's not going to take it away. We're not trying to minimize your grief. We're not saying it's going to be over, but there are things that can help you. And so when we talked about the grief framework, we really wanted to come up with actionable steps, things that can make a difference and things that can help. So the grief framework is that guide. It's kind of a trail map of how to navigate this new terrain. Recently in one of our podcasts, and I don't think this episode came out yet, she talked about it being like if you're out on a highway and there's traffic and you get off an exit that is new, you've never been there, there's no GPS and you're lost and you don't know which way to go, you're overwhelmed, you're scared. And that's kind of what grief looks like, right? And so we've created this trail marker system of the letters GRIEF to kind of guide you along this path of grief. And so we believe that our action steps, they're practical, they're direct, and they're focused on forward momentum, meaning moving forward with love rather than pain. And we also want to make sure that we are always staying connected to our loved one. We are not saying you need to end this relationship with your loved one. It's really important that you find ways to continue that bond and continue that connection with them. So here is our trail map and our guide. And so we start with the letter G, and that's really the foundation. This is about looking at, are you sleeping? Are you eating? Are you moving your body? When we know when those things are off, everything is off. And it can really challenge us to be able to take care of ourselves and be able to just even get out of bed. So we really start with that, the grounding. And then the R is rebuilding. And what we know is that it's helpful to create some sort of structure and routines. We're not saying you need to have everything mapped out for the day, but maybe thinking about what are some routines that felt good before that you'd like to. Maybe it's that cup of tea in the morning while sitting and looking outside. Maybe it's making sure that you're going to a grief group. Maybe it's you have your therapy appointment in or your coaching call in. So creating some structures and routines to kind of keep you being able to move forward. Easier said than done. We know that. And then the next letter is interacting, which is what we're talking about today. It's about how can we improve communications with others and how can we manage those relationship changes that happen when we're grieving. And then E is for evolving. And this is dealing with what we'd like to call the roadblock emotions. These are the things that can sometimes keep us stuck. And that's the anger, the guilt, the regret, the fears, and also how grief can impact our self esteem. We may be like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Like, I used to feel so confident and so, you know, um, so like I could do anything. And then you experience this and it makes you question, like, I don't know if I can do this on my own anymore. And so your self esteem is impacted. And then the last letter is F, finding, which I think finding is there's multiple layers in there. It's about exploring meaning in grief. It's about who am I now? It's also about how do I stay connected to my loved one and how do I move forward in my life with that love and that staying connected. Karen, anything you want to add?
Well, just that this framework is intended to be the basis for pretty much everything that we're doing. So for anybody who's already listened to the podcast, each week, and we'll talk about the podcast in a little bit, but we follow this framework. All the programs that we're going to be doing will be focusing on a certain letter, as we are today with the letter I. When we have other things coming up that will also be around this. And, it's not intended to be like the stages where we say, oh, this has to be prescribed in order. And it's also not to imply that there's an end, to any one of these things. We know that this is just constantly evolving. And for anybody who's a little bit further along, maybe you know that your sleep is very challenged in the beginning. Maybe some of that settles out a little bit, but then you return to having some sleep challenges again. So, what we're wanting to do is to create something that you can keep going back to, regardless of how far along you are, based on where you're feeling the pain points, based on where you're feeling the most challenged at a particular time. Because while, the grief itself, the loss itself, is always kind of that umbrella challenge. It's like specifically, what are you going through right now? Is it something going on at work? Is it a relationship? Is it you feeling, out of sorts or haven't been able to take care of yourself? So that's where the framework, comes into play.
So, as Karen just mentioned, we do have a podcast. If you're not familiar with it, we do have new episodes come out every Wednesday, and each week follows a different one of those letters of the framework. So, yesterday's podcast that came out was F for finding, and we interviewed two individuals who are caregivers to husbands with younger onset Alzheimer's, and they connected because of their shared experience and what they're going through, and they created a platform called Surviving the Now for caregivers dealing with younger onset Alzheimer's. And so yesterday's episode was about that finding. They found meaning and found connection because of this. And so next week we'll start again with our G. And so our podcast is on YouTube if you want to watch the video, or you can listen on wherever you get your podcasts and that platform. So Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, and iHeartRadio, and more. So check it out if you haven't. We would love to hear what you have to say. Our first 6 episodes, we really dive into each letter of the framework and a little bit of background about both of us. And then around January time, we started bringing on some guests to talk about different things regarding the letters in our framework.
Yeah. And there's something I think, kind of different for everybody, and we have all kinds of topics. I think, one thing Kelly and I talk about is like we really try to be mindful of who's listening. We know everybody is in a different place in their grief, that they've maybe experienced a different loss, different relationship, different type of loss. So we do try to keep it pretty broad, but then specific at the same time. But some will certainly resonate, we hope, especially for you. So, keep an eye out on that. So, okay, well, I'm going to jump right in here then, Kelly. So, as we said, this is kind of what we've talked about doing. We have this framework now, the GRIEF. And at different points, we'll be doing things like this, maybe like a free seminar. And we're going to really zero in on a particular challenge. And I think maybe we, although this is not sequentially, the first letter here that we talk about, it's certainly something that comes up so often with the groups that we do, with the individual people that we speak with. And that is our relationships and why the communication can be hard. It feels hard to be understood, to tell people how we're really feeling. So we're going to cover, a lot of that today. So you may find yourself at any point throughout this avoiding conversations because you feel like you don't want to explain your grief. It's really common to feel the pressure to move on, to kind of get over it, that this amount of time has passed, and, to really still be actively grieving. We kind of get that message. And I mean, Kelly, you were just telling me somebody was saying to you that they were told that by someone that they were close with. In one of my groups the other day, somebody said something similar. So it's really a hard thing, whether we are feeling that pressure or hearing it from someone. And we may not know how to respond. People can ask questions that just are really off the mark, or they can say things about what they think we should or shouldn't be doing, and you don't really know how to reply. Sometimes it can be hard to sort of set some of those boundaries, and we can just really feel disconnected from people. The things that used to unite us in the past, things that we'd have in common. Maybe it's that, all of our kids grew up together, or we're coworkers, or we all live in the same neighborhood, or these are my high school friends, or whatever it may be, or our family even. But the things that would have connected us, brought about conversation before, those connections just don't feel as present anymore because what's foremost on my mind and what's going on in my day to day life as a grieving person is the grief. So, as other people are talking about things besides that, if you're at, a family party, if, you're at something where people are talking about summer plans, it just feels like this big disconnection. So, we're going to talk about this today and how to navigate it.
Yeah, and I think this is such a hot topic. I always say it's unbelievable. I asked on TikTok, and I think this post almost went viral. It almost hit 100,000 comments or views and 6,000 comments. It was something like that. It was what's been the most unhelpful thing someone said to you when you're grieving, and it just blew up because there's been so many things that people have said to grieving individuals that just don't help and that are really can be hurtful and really cause you to want to be disconnected from other people. And so hopefully today's workshop is going to help you have some tools on how to really navigate those difficult conversations.
So this is our eye, and people are consistently reporting just the frustration, with having to deal with this. I think it's one of the surprises, frankly, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But that, we're not expecting this to be one of the issues that in addition to missing the person that I've lost, dealing with all the changes that come with that. Now I'm also feeling very different and unsupported, in relationships that I thought or hoped maybe were pretty solid. So, and what's interesting about it is that it's not for always a lack of having people in our lives. It's just more about them not understanding. So, why would that be? I mean, we know that our culture is not very grief friendly. There's not a lot of conversations. There's a real push to be happy. Being happy is the goal. That's what we're all trying for. And if we're not being happy and showing that in some way we're falling short, and we're trying to figure out how to get back to happiness, and other people are wanting that for us too, maybe even expressing, I just want you to be happy again. And kind of feeling like, well, I would like that too, but it's, not exactly that easy. And, people we hope, are supportive, maybe reaching out in the beginning, dropping things off, maybe checking in, but that support falls off pretty quickly. And with the passage of time, we talk about kind of like that early grief, and it's just kind of fuzzy and foggy, and we're just kind of running around on autopilot, getting a few things done. And just as some of that is starting to lift and we're starting to kind of like look around and see, okay, well, this is my life and what am I supposed to be doing with it? It's like, where did everybody go? So the timing is really poor in that way, too. This is also one of the reasons why people talk about grief being sometimes even more challenging with the passage of time. Some of it is to do with how that support just really falls off and continues to fall off as well.
Yeah. When I have a new client come in and they say, "Oh, I have a great support system." I'm like, and I try to bite my tongue because I don't want to be discount that, but I'm like, "Well, give it 6 months." Right? Because unfortunately, that's usually what happens. Or even, they get through the first year and people are great. And then that second year, it's the second birthday. And I hear, oh, I didn't have nearly many people reach out to me this year as I did last.
Mm.
And this is what happens. And it can be really hard. It can be really hurtful and it can be really isolating and lonely.
Yeah, and it feels really personal. I mean, that's the other part too. I mean, we can try and not take it personally, but if there's people that are suddenly kind of, again, going back to their lives or not reaching out as much, it does feel like it has been directed at us, that there is a lack of care. That's hard. And we don't exactly have the energy as a grieving person to be trying to rationalize things. And, we get so heavy with the emotion at a time like this. We become all emotion. So even if we were to try to say, well, they just don't understand, those moments are usually pretty fleeting, I think. And there's just a lot of hurt. So we kind of talk about the surprise and the disappointment of this. So we always talk about other people. So who is that? Well, it can be our family. Let's say we've lost a parent. It could be our spouse or our partner. It could be our children. That could be our younger children, adult children. Maybe if we've lost a spouse, they've lost a parent. It could be our siblings, our parents, extended family, friends, coworkers. So the disappointment doesn't really seem to have any limit to who we can feel this from. And usually it's going to be the more we're expecting to feel supported or connected, the harder it's going to be, or the more vocal somebody is about telling us what to do or trying to get us to move on. So the timelines are a big part of it. And that's one of the things that people I think get wrong about grief is an expectation that things steadily progress and get better with time. They kind of think of it like if you have a cold, day one is just horrible and day two is a little better, day three by a week, that we just have this steady progression of improvement, and our emotional health doesn't follow, that same type of pattern, most especially in grief. Most people are describing it much more up and down. And that can be because of things like the secondary losses. These are not all instantly evident on day one. These are things that slowly start to unfold even so much more time later. Like somebody was telling me the other day about having to get their car inspected. In Pennsylvania, that's something that you do once a year. It's usually a full day kind of thing. You have to drop your car off and go pick it up at the end of the day. That usually means needing somebody else to do that. If you've lost your spouse, partner, your parent, somebody who would help you with these things, and all of a sudden, it's been a few months, maybe even almost a full year, and it's time to get your car inspected. And it's like, I don't have anybody to drive me. Secondary loss can hit you hard, even when you felt like you were doing okay. And these can be really, this list is long and it's also kind of invisible. Nobody's really thinking that getting your car inspected is a big deal for a grieving person, but it can be, as can other things like tax season. Somebody was just talking about, if you were used to, filing jointly and having to do your taxes maybe for the person who has passed, all kinds of things like this that don't seem like they've got grief written all over them, and yet they can. There's also the signs and symptoms of grieving that we don't necessarily anticipate. These are the things that disconnect us from the versions of ourselves that we recognize. So we are exhausted, we're scattered, we're not as motivated, we are foggy, we're not clear headed, we're forgetful. So we're being asked to do some really challenging things, which is to just keep going while we're not feeling at the best version of ourselves. And it also means that people around us probably don't know that version and they're not really sure how to be interacting as well. And then the other part of it is disenfranchised grief. This could be a very broad category, but this is going to be any time. And Kelly, you can even, if you want to jump in with a more like, Kelly's very good with the official definitions of things. But if somebody is basically not understanding what this loss means to you, I use the example like an ex husband. Like somebody's been divorced and maybe it's been a very long time. Maybe it was very contentious. Maybe there was just not a good relationship during, after, and then that person passes away and they're grieving and their friends are like, you talked about this guy for years and how terrible he was and now you're sad. Like that doesn't make any sense. So I don't know, Kelly, what would you add to that?
Well, so disenfranchised grief was the term was it was founded by Ken Doka. And what he says is disenfranchised grief is grief that's not always readily accepted by society or tends to be minimized. Somebody just said in the chat feature, which I talk a lot about, is pet loss. Pet loss is a big disenfranchised grief. We tend to minimize, oh, you can just get another animal. But for some people, that's their baby. And for some people, they spend more time with their animals than they do the other people. And it can be a huge loss. And so disenfranchised grief, it can be minimized. And when that happens and when our grief is discounted, it can make us feel even more isolated and alone. And, I think also, like, I always talk a lot about like miscarriage being a bit of a disenfranchised grief. We tend to minimize that, and it happens to a lot of women and is really difficult and causes a lot of layers of different kinds of grief, right? Especially some of those secondary losses that Karen talked about. And I also wanted to mention about timelines because we tend to people put on these timelines. I had somebody recently say it was just the 2-year anniversary, and somebody was like, "Well, you're still sad about it?" Oh, and just minimizing that. So and I think until people truly have been through a major loss, do they understand what grief really looks like or feels like. And so sometimes these statements or these thoughts, they get really wrong about grief. And unfortunately, as Karen said earlier, our society is not grief informed. We don't even teach grief to our therapists, so let alone our regular population understanding the signs and symptoms and understanding secondary losses and all the little things that can trigger. As Karen was talking about the getting the inspection on the car, I thought about myself. My dad died almost 17 months ago. And back in November, I was getting a new car. Yay, exciting, right? Until the night before I got the car, and I realized that my automatic dial, like, for phone, my dad was on my speed dial, and I looked at it and I was like, "Oh, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't get a new car. Maybe I'll just keep this one," because I didn't wanna change that. I didn't wanna have to delete that. And so even those little things, this is supposed to be something good, and it hit me in a way, and I was like, "Oh," right? Thankfully, the new card, that wasn't even an option to put in the speed dials, which probably made it easier for me with that. But these are the things that other people don't even think about or are aware of that could be really disappointing and hard.
Yeah. And you said, about the little thing, but our most of our lives are made up of little things, little moments, the things that are personal to us, the stuff that we're not even really recognizing when, life before loss, but in the aftermath, all these things really stick out. So, and of course, Kelly, the name of the person who came up with disenfranchised grief. So, anyway, so what they say and how it feels. So this is important because let's look at these statements here. How are you? I'm here if there's anything you need. You're so strong. Like these seem okay things. They think they're certainly okay things to say or to ask. But let's really think about how this hits. Like, how are you? Oh my goodness, like what that does to a grieving person. All of you have had this question. And as I always say, it's kind of strange now because this is also become equivalent to like hello. I mean, when I go to the food store, hey, how are you? Obviously, I don't really think he's asking, but for other people, you answer the phone, hey, how are you? Like, it's just sort of now our greeting, our start, our warm up to like talking. So it's like for the grieving person, it's like, okay, who's asking? How much time do you have? Do you really want the real answer? Do I feel like sharing it? You have to do all of this thinking that, as we were just saying, you're not feeling particularly sharp, um, or energized or able to navigate other people's energy. So it's such a simple question that is so layered and complicated. I'm here if there's anything you need. Well, in your mind, it's like, I don't even know what that is. I have no idea what it is that I need right now. So it's not something that I can just quickly answer. Uh,
And people aren't
yes.
going to probably reach out, right?
Right.
The
Uh-huh.
majority of the grieving individuals I talk to would say, "Well, I'm not gonna reach out anyways." Which I think has been interesting because in our podcast, a couple of people have talked about creating lists of things that you need help with. And so when somebody says, like, let me know if there's anything, you can be like, actually, I have a list here and give them something off of that list. And I kind of like that idea because I think we have these ideas, but I was with a widow this morning for breakfast and she was saying she needed help with one specific thing. Like she was good to be like, hey, can you help me with this thing? And but not everybody knows it, but in the moment we think of things. So maybe try, keep a list. And then when somebody says, well, be like, okay, here's what I need. I need you to jumpstart that lawnmower. I need you to trim that bush for me. I need you to come and fix my closet door, whatever it
Yeah.
may be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard, to ask for help or to accept help. And, again, we kind of talk about our culture. We also are very used to being independent. So, we're kind of talking about our identity piece as well with some of this that just doesn't feel as comfortable. But as I always say to people, it's not all the time. This isn't going to be forever. You're not going to necessarily always need certain things forever, but for right now, perhaps. The idea of you being so strong, this was introduced to me by a grieving person, but this really can make people feel crazy and upset because it's like, well, what choice do you think I have? People say, oh, well, if it was me, I would just be in bed all the time. And it's like, well, are you implying then that I don't love my person as much or something? I mean, we can go all kinds of places. Another one, this is common. He, she would want you to be happy. Um, that is one that people hear all the time, and as I say, this can be really good advice if it originates from us. If I'm using my loved one as a guiding light down the road at some point to try and get myself motivated, perhaps. But, for somebody else to tell me, it feels very, very different. And then just the questions, you gonna move? Are you gonna start dating? Like, people are like, "I'm, like, just trying to get through my days right now, let alone making some of these big decisions." So this is, and this could just be one conversation that you're hearing these things. So imagine like you do go to a get together or something and you're getting this from all over. Like it's one of the many reasons that a grieving person can feel overwhelmed and exhausted.
Yeah, I had one widow tell me one time, he said somebody gave him a warning before the funeral and said, people are going to ask you what you're going to do with the house. And he was like,
Mm,
no, they're not. They're not going to ask me at the funeral. She died suddenly. Sure enough, someone came, well, what are you going to do with the house?
mm,
And he was like, I don't even know how I'm going to get through the next minute, let alone what I'm going to do with this house.
yeah. Yeah.
And, I like what somebody just said in the comments. It said, "What does strong mean? Not feel?" Right? And I think that's such a valid thought because people and I think what it comes down to, in my opinion, is people wanna see you being okay and looking okay so they don't have to worry about you.
Yeah.
That's what I really think a lot of it comes down to.
Yeah, it makes it kind of more comfortable for them, because they're not sure what to do otherwise. So, because of all of this, when someone asks how we're doing, we probably do more often say, well, I'm fine. Because sometimes it just doesn't seem worthwhile. It just doesn't seem like it's worth our time. They're not going to respond the way I want them to. And, it's not to say that you have to give your full story to everybody. But the reason why we say this is that we don't know if the person can handle the real answer. We also get worried about being a burden. Maybe we have had some people who have been helpful or have been kind and have wanted to listen. But what I hear all the time, one of the probably one number one things that brings people to the individual work when they're doing it with me is they'll say, I just can't keep saying the same things to the same people. I think they're looking for me to say something different or original. I don't have anything new to say, but I also kind of still need to keep talking about it or would want to. Yeah, and maybe somebody's asking us, we run into somebody and we're afraid of being tearful. We just don't have the energy to explain it, or we just kind of sense that this is what they're looking for. And we just, we're social creatures. We're used to kind of trying to please people and, be kind of easygoing. And so this can be tough. So we say, I'm okay, and then the conversation will move on.
So we're going to talk now. If you've grabbed a piece of paper and a pen, if you haven't, if you wanted to go ahead and do that, we're going to talk about three different types of relationships and how maybe our relationship with them will determine our response. And so, what we break it down is into three categories: the full access. These are the people that can truly listen to your grief, that can hold space for your grief, that can allow you to sit and cry. That's that person who doesn't try to tell you what you should or should to be feeling. They're the ones who maybe used your loved one's name. They're the ones that are going to just remember maybe the birthday and the anniversary. These are the people that just get it, I think, and that don't put a timeline, right? After I think somebody just said in the chats after 8 months, you need to move on. And then there's the middle, which is the partial access. These are the people who care, but they may not truly get it. They may be the acquaintances who care. They maybe check in sometimes, but they don't fully understand, and they don't always know how to help or what they should do. I think people think that they're supposed to do all these things, and Karen and I were talking before we got on today. I said, "Rarely does an empathetic response make a difference. It's connection that counts." Brené Brown said that. And I think we people think you have to do so much more, but sometimes it's just that connection that can make a difference. And then the other layer is the limited access. These are the people who ask but don't need the full story. They're kind of the ones that are nosy. Well, tell me more about how they died, right? Why? Why do you need to know all that, right? Or they get involved in maybe some of the sometimes I hear there is some things said about you out in the community, or there's things, they may get caught up in some of that and some of the cattiness. And that these also could be the people that say the stupid things, that say the unhelpful comments, and that maybe minimize your grief. So what we want you to do is create a list, or you can use this picture, which I said looks like an avocado, but on kind of your support wheel, your support access, thinking about who are the people in your life that are in that full access, right? Who is in there? Who are your, what I call your grief friends, right? So Karen is one of my grief friends. I know I can talk to her about my grief. You know, think about that and who's in that partial and then who's in the limited. So I'll give you about 2 minutes to just go ahead and make a list. And I'm bringing back the other slide so you can be remember and just make a list just so you know, because what I think why this is so important is we get let down a lot and we have expectations about people and we think that they should show up in certain ways. And so then we'll go to somebody maybe who's in that limited access category and we try to talk about our grief and then we get let down because they say that stupid thing again. So if we know who these people are, we can choose to make sure we go to the right people for the right things and the right supports.
And as I always talk about, Kelly, with people is that, each one of us, depending, I mean, different life circumstances, whether we're working, retired, where we live. But, if we have a handful of people, sometimes we have 10 people in our lives, maybe we have 20 people in our lives, maybe we have 5 people, but our hope is like, I've been cultivating these relationships for a long time. I have tried to be a good friend or a good person to them. I've been supportive when they need it. So I think like if I've got 10 people between the people I work with and, a couple of good friends that I've grown up with and my neighbor who I talk to all the time, I'm kind of expecting and hoping that almost all of them are going to be able to be supportive to me. And that percentage ends up being way, way lower. And so I think also through this, what we want you to recognize is that realistically, we could probably almost hoped to get the good support and have the grief friend with maybe one person, two people, maybe three people, but it's not going to usually be much more than that. And it's not always going to be the lifelong friendships. There can be someone that you met through a grief group. It could be that you were taking a walk and you end up talking to your neighbor who you never talk to. And then suddenly somebody said something to me about vulnerability bringing community. And, maybe you decide to open up, like, what the heck? Why not? And next thing you know, this person has also had a loss, and you find yourself talking to this person and feeling more supported by someone that you barely know. Um, there's a reason why um, when I was naming, the website way back that when I went with the idea of grief in common, because when we've had a significant loss, that's sort of what matters in terms of our commonalities. When in that moment, when I'm grieving at that level, that's the thing that is in that moment, maybe defining me the most or what I am trying to connect with the most with other people.
I just have to share what was said in the chat because I love this. Grief rearranges your address book.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that
So
is
true.
so true, right?
So
And,
true.
and I think as Karen talked about, when somebody we also have this thought that because we've been there, that we were there for them when they had their loved one die. We showed up for them. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily gonna be able to show up for us.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big expectation that comes up a lot. I hear that a lot. "Well, I was there for them when their loved one died." They may not be able to be there for you because it may bring up their own grief again as well.
Yeah. So hopefully everybody's had a chance to go through and write out their own list based on some of this access here. And I think I have somebody here in the group that I was already talking to this morning, so he'll know the same. But someone had introduced this to me once that you can't get milk at the hardware store. And I think that that is such a good saying because it's like we get frustrated if we keep trying to go to the same place and we keep coming up empty handed. So, this list is not meant to end friendships, it's not meant to close people out. What it's meant to say is that for right now, these are the people who have the capacity for maybe a little bit more of what I need. That friend who's really funny and loves to go to concerts or something, maybe someday I will be up to doing those things again, and that friend would be somebody I could do those things with, but they're maybe just not my grief friend, as Kelly said. So,
Yeah.
Kelly, do you wanna go through, like, the how to answer with different people?
Yeah. So, and I think, I've been seeing some comments. First of all, I just want to thank all of you for who are putting comments in the chat and being so supportive and empathetic to each other. It just actually can make me tear up a little bit. It's just nice to see people being validated and knowing that they're not alone. At the end of the day, that's what my mission really is to help people not feel alone on their grief journey. And so to be able to see all these comments, thank you for that. But so back to the question. So the full access, this is where you can be honest. Karen asks me all the time, "Well, how are you doing?" And I can be honest with her and I can tell her, I'm feeling kind of griefy, whatever it is. And so this might be the full access people is to be the honest, right? I had a moment I cried in the middle of the grocery store today. I couldn't believe it. I cried over the sunflower seeds or whatever it is. Then the partial access, these are people, remember that sometimes they're okay. Maybe sometimes no, they're not. Maybe a comment like, today was hard. I've been crying, struggling more than I expected. And the limited access, these are the people who may not get it, that you may not want to have a follow up question from and you say, "It's been tough. I'm doing my best." It's not necessarily saying you're good, right? You're not going back to the I'm okay or I'm good, but you're not giving them a lot that maybe is going to continue that conversation. And as Karen said, these people are going to shift and evolve in these access levels, I think, especially as time progresses and things like that. Sometimes people are great in the beginning and as one of my clients had a best friend, said she was fabulous. The first 6 months of her dad's death was so good, so great. And then looked at her and said, "Okay, it's been 6 months. It is time to get over this and to move on." And obviously, that person changed that access level at that moment. And so this can happen. And not everybody deserves the same level of access to your grief. Not everybody deserves to hear your grief story.
Yeah. Yeah. And to really help also maybe clarify the difference between the partial and the limited, I think for me, it would also maybe come down to intention. I think maybe if I feel like someone is trying, but boy, are they just really misguided, I would kind of try to help them understand a little bit better by giving them a little bit more because maybe that will help them move up to the full access. But if someone either is just really blatantly not trying or not making an effort, then that's where it's just limited, where I'm not going to give them more. I'm not going to follow up. And, as Kelly said, you don't have to perform this or do this for anybody.
So, again, building on community, one of the things that we have created was a private Facebook community. So, if you're not a part of it, we would highly encourage you to join. There's the link, it is private. We try to post things throughout the week with based on the different letters of our framework. And our community has been growing, and it's been nice to see people commenting. If you are part of the community, feel free to share, comment, post things. We want this to be about you guys and be a space to be able to feel validated, to feel less alone in your grief and supported.
Well, and Kelly, I wanted to mention you're talking about the chat. I kind of feel like that's what the Facebook community has been looking like, with people, posting a challenge that they're having in the moment and a lot of people responding to it. And that's the whole intention, behind it. And it is a private Facebook community. So just for anybody who's not certain of the ins and outs, that means when you join this community, only the people in it can see what you're writing. So it's not like your neighbor, your boss, your sister, whomever, like they can't see anything in there if they're not part of the community. So I think for some people that's also kind of enticing as well. So we want to kind of keep talking about this a little bit more. The reason why we are encouraging you to not just say, I'm fine and move on, because I'm a big believer that we teach people how to treat us. Maybe we've heard that phrase before, but it really does apply in grief. And we'll kind of have that situation perhaps where people are asking us, we're like, nobody's supporting me, nobody's interacting or kind of giving me the response I'm looking. So I'm just going to stop bothering, and I'll just say, I'm fine, it's just easier." But then people stop asking, and it's like, "Why has everybody stopped asking me how I'm doing?" Well, the more we say I'm fine, they're not gonna ask anymore. So, we're gonna feel unseen, that resentment can be quietly growing, and that disconnection as well, that's happening. If we continue to say we're fine, people assume that we are, and hey, that's just great for them, because then they don't have to ask any follow-up, and maybe they don't have to, feel, uncomfortable. But if we are able to offer small, honest answers, we are creating more room for connection. Doesn't mean having to share more than you want to, but even just saying something like, I'm hanging in there. I'm doing the best I can. It's been a hard day. It's been heavy. Even that small truth can change the tone and increase your odds of feeling connected because otherwise, this is a very isolating journey. And if we are finally talking to somebody and we are not sharing the true parts of ourselves, even just a sliver of it, we walk away feeling really empty. Those are very, very empty interactions. And that's just going to feed the isolation and feed the narrative that nobody understands. So we want to try and do this even in smaller doses if we can. And some people in here I've noticed through the chat as well have come up with some things that what they say when someone asks how they're doing.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So moving forward, um, this couple of things here, these are sort of like our important points. I hear this a lot. I will talk to somebody, again, I work with a lot of people, let's say, who've maybe lost a parent. And so maybe they have a spouse or a partner who just isn't quite understanding. And I'll say, well, maybe if you try to communicate, and they'll say, I've already told them. I already told them that I've been struggling and that I'm having a hard time. And sometimes, I guess our thought is if we say something to somebody, and our hope would be that that would be sufficient. But sometimes people need to hear things again. The example I give is teaching our kids manners. We don't tell them one time, we tell them 300 times, maybe even in a short period of time, and with the hopes that eventually they'll get it. So people do understand better sometimes with the repetition, maybe different times, different words. We want, especially those that are closest to us, to understand a little bit better. So if you've tried the conversation, and we are going to talk about in a minute some communication tools, there are going to be some people with whom it will be worth your time and patience to repeat it. But remember, they will not necessarily always understand because they either haven't had the experience. And Kelly and I think we say that a lot. Well, they don't understand, it hasn't happened to them. There are those times where a person has had the loss, and that doesn't always make it better because, well, then they know how they got through it and they're thinking that you should be following the same thing. So it just really goes to show how we're all very different through all of this. So you are the expert in your grief. And we want to imagine that we are teaching and sharing that with those with that small group that we mentioned that would be open to listening. You can choose that level of communication that you're most comfortable with. Do you want to mostly be limiting it to in person? Is it going to be on the phone, via text? You get to decide. It's up to you where you feel most comfortable right now. Um, this is important too in our communication with our goals. Sometimes we try to, well, we don't try to be, we are very outcome focused. So we go in and we say, I'm going to share, and then we're waiting for the right or the wrong response. When it's the wrong response, this was a failure and I shouldn't have bothered. But if I go into an interaction and I say, you know what, I need them to know how I'm feeling. I need to say what's true for me, and I just need to be heard. And then whatever they do with that is going to be up to them. And I need to let go of that outcome. That can very much change what we determine like the success of that situation and that communication to be. So think about the outcomes. If you ever like send a text and maybe ask somebody, hey, like, maybe this is before grief, but you want to go out to dinner and you've got exclamation points and smiley faces, and they just write back like, sure. And it's like,
Okay.
yeah, okay. All
Not even
right.
okay, just okay.
And maybe I didn't even realize I was looking for an outcome, but I guess I was looking for you to match my enthusiasm or something. So we do a lot of things, whether we realize it or not, that are outcome based. And we want to, especially right now where we're feeling pretty fragile, people talk about their feelings getting hurt more easily. We want to be mindful of that. There will be times there are people you just can't talk to. We're realistic. We get that. Um, we want to forgive them. I mean, we don't have endless choices here. And in some ways, maybe that's the good news. And things to understand about forgiveness, we don't forgive people because they deserve it. We forgive people because maybe it brings us peace, because it allows us to not keep thinking about it, to not keep looping around the unfairness of it, and just to go move on with all of the million other things that grief is asking of me. So we try to communicate, and if absolutely we get to the point that that is just not working, then we see what we can do to try and um, understand. You talk about forgiveness for yourself, this process, and for the people who don't get it.
But I also think forgiveness doesn't always mean forgetting.
Right.
And so, there's a saying, right? You wouldn't get back into a tiger that hurt you, right? So sometimes it's also okay to take a break from people and say, you know what, I just can't have them in my life right now because it's not helpful.
Yes, and to be clear, that it's more about what's in your heart and in your mind. I
Mm.
think we spend a lot of time with people in our head, even if we don't have to see them face to face. They're getting a lot of space. Um,
Don't let
and
them take up rent free space in your brain.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Do you want to share a little bit about the template letters and then I'll share how they'll going to receive them?
Yeah, absolutely. So we wanted to give you guys a takeaway because it's one thing to talk about communication, and we gave you a couple of like those quick answer scenarios, but there are those relationships that you may be like truly worried about or truly struggling with that are going to require a little bit more finessing, maybe a little bit more help with that language. These are not easy things to, just come up with the words for. A lot of times we say like, I don't even know how to express this. So we came up with 3 template letters for different scenarios. The first is just a general grief communication letter. If anybody did read the book, The Grief Experience, this is actually shared in that. This was the tool that I had created for that. And basically, the idea is to help us kind of form our thoughts. So we can use it for just that reason, even if we just write it out and never do anything with it. Or maybe we do give them the letter, or maybe the letter becomes the basis for a conversation. So there's the general grief communication letter, and this would be best for someone you're especially close with, but they're not also grieving because you're trying to say, this is my grief, this is how I'm feeling. We also tried to think of the different scenarios. The letter to the friend who disappeared or who doesn't know what to say. This is going to help you kind of, maybe give them some ideas of what would help. And then finally, the letter to the family member who's also grieving. Because as we always say, our family isn't always that place where we can get that support because they're grieving too. But yet we're seeing this shifting family dynamic, and this is causing me a lot of stress and sadness.
So First of all, I just have to comment because I have given the first letter from the grief experience book to many of my clients, and I have always heard some amazing responses and great discussions that came out of it when they actually used the template and sent it to their person in their life. And so I want to thank Karen for sharing these with us because they truly can make a difference and they have helped so many of my clients. And I'm grateful that I have this tool that I can share with them because it really does help. So we have created a PDF fillable worksheet, work like kind of like a short workbook almost. And so we have it in black and white or color. It is PDF fillable, so you can just type into it right on the computer, or you can print it out. We didn't want you to have to worry about all the colored ink, so we made you a black and white version that you can print it out and you can write it in, and then you can use it kind of as a guide. You might want to add more, you might want to delete things. And so this will be emailed to you tomorrow within probably within about 24 hours. These template letters will be going out to you along with a link to the recording today so you can watch it again and just have that. So again, be patient. I will send these out tomorrow. I got to get the Zoom recording edited and all, and it will be up on YouTube, and I'll share the link with you along with the template letters. And let us know how they work out. We would love to hear. They are really amazing. Karen did a great job with these, and I'm really grateful to be able to share them with all of you.
Well, thank you. And yeah, so come to the Grief Ladies community and share in there, what your
Absolutely.
experiences have been.
Absolutely. So we did have some discussion in the chat about people maybe not having Facebook or for getting kicked off of Facebook. Totally understand. It's not my favorite platform either. But Karen, you do have, if I believe I'm right, you do have a chat feature on your
hmm
website
I have
for
a
other
chat feature
people.
and there's a message board on there as well. Yeah.
Okay, so for those of people that can't be on Facebook or whatever, maybe you can check out Grief Uncommon and those options. Also, we created some journals as well. These are also PDF fillable and downloadable. They're on sale. They're like $5 each. And we have ones for teens and kids and also for the early days and um, after the early days, maybe after the first year or so, even though we don't like to put a timeline. So these are available. There's our link. You can also go to griefladies.com and find all that information as well. So just want to, again, we're almost out of time, but just want to mention, make sure you join the community, check out our podcast, subscribe, like, comment. That is going to help get our podcast out to more people. And I truly believe it could help for someone. We also have some amazing workshops on our website. Karen just added a couple of new ones, dating after loss, and that's for any type of loss, not just widows, and also navigating. Well, I'm drawing a blank. Karen, what is it? Are you drawing a blank too?
Yes. We
Ah,
were preparing so many other things, but go visit all the workshops. We've been doing. I have to tell you, between the writing, because we're talking about the books, we've been writing like crazy. So I think that has dominated our discussions a lot lately. Just to give you an idea, if you ever look at my inbox, it's just Kelly Dougherty of everything that we're going back and forth with.
I
So
probably sent her way too many emails.
no, no, it's
I
helpful.
try to put them together,
It's helpful.
um, but we do have some exciting things. We
Yeah.
are in the works of having some books come out. One is dealing with kind of the first year, the earliest days of grief, and we also have our Grief Ladies book that's kind of going to come out along with a workbook. And so I would, stay in touch with us, start looking at, you're going to start hearing more about these things. I would say probably within the next 3 months, we're going to be seeing some book releases with our information. And it's just, we want to make sure we have all different types of ways to support you, from the Facebook community to events like this, to some books, to some journals, to some on-demand workshops. So we're really trying to make it as comprehensive as possible to really be able to help all of you navigate your grief journey.
Yeah. And if there's ever anything that you want to hear more about as far as like topics on the podcast, I mean, we are doing a lot of writing. We're gonna have one big book, and then we're kind of doing these small grief brain readers. So there's a lot coming for sure.
So thank you all for being here. I want to be mindful of your time. We will stick around for a couple of minutes if you do have any questions you'd like to ask. Um, so just want to thank you so much for being a part of this. We're sorry that you have to be a part of this. We're thinking of all of you. Thank you for everybody for being so empathetic and compassionate in the chat feature. And we hope to see you in the Facebook community and in other future events. So take care.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Yes.